Salutations, everybody. Welcome back to another Total Warhammer 3 guide. I'm Lord Foreign, and today we are covering the Greenskins faction and their various lords. So, this video is going to be divided into chapters, so you can skip around below. We're going to go over the faction, anything that makes them unique, so general faction concepts, how they play. Then we'll go further into the units. What should you build? What are strong? What are weak? General ideas of how to play the Greenskins army. Moving on, we'll talk about the economy, and then the technology, and finally we'll go over each lord's starting location. So, the Greenskins are both a very complex and a very straightforward faction. Some of the lords, and we're not actually showing one right now, we're on Wurrzag, the Great Green Prophet, have unique mechanics, which I'll cover in each of those lords' special areas. And the biggest one you have to be aware of as the Greenskin is the Wurrzag, which is probably a poor statement of war. If anybody ever played the old Medieval 2 Total War or various games, you'll remember that you could do crusades or jihads. This is kind of the spiritual successor to those. So how this works as a Greenskin faction, as you fight battles, raise settlements, and get it passively, or succeed in previous WOGs, you will build reputation. Once reputation maxes out, you'll have the ability to click on this button up here, which is currently grayed out, and it will allow you to select another province on the map, at which point you'll declare a WOG for that settlement. Your goal will be then to take that settlement and hold it for the remainder of the WOG, which is usually, I think, 20 turns. Does not get any shorter even if you own the settlement. You have to keep a hold of it. Thankfully, it does not prove to be that hard usually to hold the WOG goals, because ideally you want to declare it usually on a major capital settlement. Like one of the first WOGs you might do as this faction is on the headquarters of a dwarven faction. Take out the capital. It's a very smart move. So what it does is based off the another number of units in your army, and you will want 20 units in your army, or even if you have two armies, 20 units in both armies. You will get the WOG will be declared, and then every turn for several turns, it will recruit a secondary army attached to your first. There'll be a little bar that'll appear next to your starting green bar that will fill up. And it'll fill up to the amount of units you have in your army. So if you have 20, you'll get 20. That is a free army that will stick with that army, so you can't separate it. You can't pull enemies out. It will replenish, unlike some of the other blood hosts or disciple armies of Slanesh and Khorne. It basically means you'll have two armies in one. So if you have two full stacks of 20, you declare WOG. All of a sudden, given 3 or 4 turns, you'll have 4 armies in 2 different stacks. So you'll have, rather than 40 units, you'll now have 80. This allows the Greenskins to play relatively passively. Not that the Greenskins ever play passively, but then when you hit a WOG, you will explode onto the map. It is very possible to take over a whole country, 10 or 12 settlements during a WOG, because you've got 20 turns, which is huge. And just be aware that if you lose a unit in a WOG army, it will not come back. But so long as it doesn't die, it will heal given time. If you raise a new army after you've declared a WOG, it will not gain WOG units. As far as I am aware, I don't think of any circumstance where you can pull that off. So ideally, when you declare a WOG, you want to have maxed out armies, even if you go a turn or 2 into debt, because you can always disband part of the main army and just keep the WOG units. Now, each Greenskin Lord, and this is a little bit out of order, they have their own WOGs. So in this case, this would be Wurrzag's WOG, and has a chance to contain savage orcs. Various other orc lords will have different compositions of their WOGs. So just be aware of that, because it does vary. Another mechanic the Greenskin have is scrap, and that is right here. You gain scrap from battles, looting, missions. Raiding is the way you'll probably get most of it. Raising settlements, technology upgrades, and you will spend it on various things. You will spend it on some of your technologies, require scrap, but also you can use it to put upgrades on your units. For example, this Savage Orc Biguns, you could upgrade it using 20 scrap. You could theoretically give it this Liquor Flasks, which would give it 15 more leadership, which is pretty good. You could give it 30 missile resistance, or you could give it a bonus versus large. These varies per unit, so you might have different ones. Obviously not the same there, but you could even put on your archers. So these ones would reload faster, have more leadership, or missile resistance. The rider, weapon strength up 25, which is pretty big. Scrap saddles, armor, and movement, and then missile resistance. This varies, so I'm not going to go into which is the better upgrades, but usually stuff that gives either pure out resistance or increased armor and attack is pretty good. And those are the two main mechanics of the Greenskins. Once you complete a WOG, you'll get a trophy, and it will last a certain amount of turns, and it will give a bonus to your faction in total. And it can be pretty powerful. It can be weak, depending on the WOG. Ideally, you want to declare WOGs for bigger settlements. I believe it gets you bigger trophies. Honestly, I couldn't tell you the details of how the trophy creation works. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the Greenskins play style. So the Greenskins sit at a very, I guess they would be defined as a neutral faction in the scheme of Total Warhammer in general. They're not good, like you could say the good elf gods, the dwarves to some degree, and the humans, like the Empire, Bretonia. But they're not bad, like the bad Dark Elves and other of those. But they're also not Chaos Worshippers. They have their own gods, Gork and Mork, which is like, as far as I understand it, it's a two-headed god, one head named Gork, the other named Mork. So they are, in fact, an untainted faction. They will clear corruption in their lands. In fact, the Greenskins do it pretty well in the scheme of things. They're various. They have some very good buildings for purging it and clearing corruption. It's not a huge concern for them, but they are definitely not a chaos or a vampire or a demon faction. Now, that doesn't mean they're liked by the good factions. It doesn't mean they're liked by the bad factions. They're pretty well equally hated. You're not going to get a lot of allies as Greenskins outside of other Greenskins. And that gets us into our last semi-major mechanic for the Greenskins. The Greenskins have a strange mechanic where if you kill the leader of a faction, so like this guy here, you defeat him in battle, you will get a chance to confederate them. Now, it's slightly different than other confederation because the only way you're ever really going to get it is through combat. It'll give you an option to kill the enemy warlord, confederate the faction, in which you will get that warlord as part of your faction. They're not immortal outside the legendary ones, be aware of that, or just do nothing. It allows the Greenskins to very rapidly consolidate their lands. For example, if we beat this guy's battle and then go on immediately to take out this guy, which you wouldn't want to do, but if we did, we would annex all his provinces, which could be a good thing because you picked up a lot more land, but it can also be a bad thing because if they are a wide mass spreading Greenskin faction, they will have provinces far away bordering other enemies who they probably were at war with, because the Greenskins are almost always at war with people. And those people will then declare war on you. So there's pluses and minuses to both. In my experience, while Confederation is really good, the Greenskin AIs don't tend to build the best buildings in their settlements or the most economical builds. So you tend to have to spend a lot of time rebuilding their empire the way you want. But it can prove to be a very nice, quick growth of power if you do it properly. Oh, there's one last faction, or two last faction mechanics I should mention. One I forgot to mention in my dwarf video, and I will definitely make sure to mention in my Skaven guide, and that is the Underway. So the Greenskins have access to the Underway, which allows them to cross terrain. They can just freely jump to here from here. It's very powerful. They can't attack while using it. They're immune to attrition, which means this is great if you're invading chaos provinces, because you can jump mountain ranges, move in quickly without losing troops. You have a good ambush defense, but if it's intercepted, enemies have a chance of intercepting you when you move, and if you are intercepted and you lose the battle, your army is totally wiped out. There's no chance of retreating. But it's a very nice one. The other mechanic that deserves some mention is the Greenskins encampment stand. It is not encampment like other factions. It is a raiding camp stance. The Greenskins start basically pillaging the land around them. And the funny thing is you can use it on your own province. It will give you some income. It will give you scrap sometimes. It will cause growth and control penalties. You can still move. You're pretty good against ambush. You ruin the income if you raid your own settlement. This income becomes reduced to 0. So very rarely do you want to raid your own lands, and it does make you slightly better at defense. If you're not at war with a faction and you have nothing else to do, you should almost always park your Greenskins in the enemy lands while raiding, or people you're going to be at war with soon, and just get the extra money and other stuff from it. It's worth doing. It's quite powerful in its own right. And then there is another semi-mechanic, and it proves to be a good lead-in to talking about units. So we'll talk about it briefly, then we'll cover units. That is the Savage Orcs. So the Savage Orcs are a unique semi-limited race within the Greenskins, I guess. I don't really know how to define it in terms of that. But there is a subset of Greenskins called Savage Orcs, and they live in certain areas. They live in the Badlands here. Anywhere there's a red skull, they tend to live. And what that means is, and there's other places in the world where this exists, but that gives you access to a unique building chain. So we will get into that here. It unlocks the Savage Orc Camp. And Savage Orcs they're better than your average Greenskins, but the fact you can only recruit them from limited areas means, obviously, first off, your empire is supposed to be around those areas, but it does weaken you if you try and rely on them when moving outside of their homelands. You won't be able to replenish them. The Greenskins do have access to pretty good regiments of renowns. They do require some DLCs and stuff, but they, I think, have the largest amounts of regiments of renown. And when they complete a WOG, they get the ability to recruit others of them. So, and you require different trophies if you get them. In general, the victory conditions for the Greenskins in this case is control lands. They don't have anything overwhelmingly special. It does vary per lord. One of them has to control Karak 8 peaks, and we'll get into that when we get to them. So let's talk units now. So, oops, sorry. Helps if I click on the right thing, doesn't it? So the Greenskins they're pretty well rounded as a faction. They don't necessarily excel at everything. In fact, on average, their high-level armies are not equivalent to some of the other factions' high-level armies. That is where they have to rely on the WOGs to just mass troops to outnumber enemies. But they have access to... They have artillery, they have monsters, they have cav, they have archers, they have good infantry. They even have half-decent magic users. Really, offhand, the only thing I can think of them missing is like a dragon, which they don't need because they have trolls and stuff. So let's get started. First off, the Savage Orcs are a very unique unit, and they're, of course, only recruited in the Savage areas of the map. They are a high damage unit. They have Frenzy, meaning they attack better. They attack better when they have high leadership, and they do more damage when they have high leadership as well. But they also have what's called War Paint, and it gives them physical resistance. They don't have any armor, but any physical damage to them is reduced by 25%. And that applies even on their archers, which is kind of hilarious. So their archers are... all orc units are decent at melee combat. And there's also goblin units which aren't, which we'll cover. But this allows the greenskin archers, even though they don't have armor and they don't block with shields, to actually do a pretty good job fighting other archers because the reduced physical damage, so long as the enemy's not using like magic arrows, Sisters of Avalorn in particular, crush you, they will do a pretty good job. and they also can be used in fighting afterwards. The range is a little bit shorter, but they're good. So the first one, you've got Axe. Unfortunately, it's not armor penetrating. The second one is not armor penetrating either. Half decent. And then at the top, you have access to the Savage Orc Big Guns, which are just in general bigger, stronger orcs. They're pretty much a flat upgrade from the Savage Orcs. Be aware that these guys, as good as they are, they really are not, they don't have armor penetration, so that is something they struggle against. So dwarf units, I think dark elves, chaos, they can struggle against those. But overall, if it's unarmored and it gets into melee combat, you're gonna kill it. Other greenskins, Skaven are particularly good prey. Vampire counts, zombies and stuff are jokes compared to orc units. Even some of the units like Skarbrand, who's not far away from where this guy starts, can be taken out by orc units. They're definitely one of the stronger infantry factions if played properly. Then you've got access to a Cav, again, Savage Orcs, so they're physically resistant. So they ride boars, which is kind of interesting. So you've got the base one that just rides boars, and then you've got the bigger version, which just slightly better stats, more upkeep, but overall a general flat increase to damage and everything. Reasonably fast moving, decent in melee combat because they are resistant to physical damage and does have some armor. They're a good shot cav unit. They're tier 3. They're worth using when you get them. All the other ones, Savage Orcs, are technically tier 1. I'd almost put these as tier 2 with their physical resistance. They're pretty good at what they do. Anyway, that's the Savage Orcs. Only can be recruited in certain areas. So as most green-skinned factions, you will not have access to them, which is why I wanted to cover them first. Instead, you'll have access to goblin units at the start. So goblins are... they're not as bad as zombies or the Tomb King starting soldiers, but they're pretty much in the next tier. They're pretty bad. Their stats on a whole aren't bad. What makes them pretty bad is the leadership. They rout a lot. And unlike a Skaven, they don't have bonuses towards running away. It's not abnormal to see goblin units rout, and rally again. Thankfully, and this is something you need to be aware of, is they are expendable, meaning if they run away, your orc units will not suffer a leadership penalty. Only other goblin units will, or other units with expendable. So this means in a large army, you might have a strong core of orc units backed up by a lot of goblins. And if the goblins die, your orcs don't care, basically. They also have access to goblin archers, which are weaker than savage orc archers. They're worth bringing. They're not good against armor, so dwarves, anything with heavy armor, you're going to struggle against with these. But they are a decent range unit. Thankfully, both goblins and goblin archers have super low maintenance. Just for comparison, their base income building gives you 250 gold. Their goblin unit is about 75. So you could support 3-4 goblin units with one income building. The greenskins in general economy is pretty good for supporting at least goblin units in combat. So you should never struggle to fill out stacks as the greenskins unless you're trying to just get top line infantry all the time. So the next thing we'll talk about is the orcs and to a lesser degree some more goblins. So this is your standard infantry building, greenskin recruitment. It unlocks orc boys. Orc boys are solid. They will lose to something like savage orcs, but that's besides the point. They're standard base infantry. They have shields. They have some decent armor. They fight reasonably well in combat and have good leadership. You won't go wrong using orc boys at the beginning of the game. They're definitely worth bringing more of these to the combat than bringing goblins. And remember that 250 base income, you can support 2 from one of those buildings. Again, cheap, decent unit. Up above that, you have access to another goblin unit. These are nasty skulkers. These are the damage goblins, basically. They're armor piercing. They can kind of sneak around the battlefield because they have stalks, so they're invisible. They do damage when they win in melee combat. They hit even harder. They're really good flanking or eliminating weakening routing units. They have a smoke bomb, which allows that weakens movement and charge speed around them. Basically allowing them to, if they get the drop on an enemy, they can easily kill them, but they will not hold as a front line. For that, you're going to need orc units or goblins that you intend to die. Then you have your orc error boys. Again, mispronouncing of error. The Greenskins talk in a very interesting manner. These are a really just flat upgrade from the goblin archers. They have better range, better missile strength, better combat stats. They cost more. Once you get these, you really shouldn't bring goblin archers unless you just need some range that are cheap or you want to fill out an army. Falling above that, we'll cover this first. You have access to the first hero here. You have a black orc big boss. This is pretty much your standard melee combat hero that has stuff like heroic killing blow. It affects morale. They're pretty solid. The interesting thing here is rabble rouse, which if you have it in an area around it, it prevents psychology. This means fear and terror do not affect those units under the command of the big orc boss. This is going with the whole Greenskins faction concepts type stuff where they tend to be around warlords or powerful fighters that lead them, and then they fall to the next powerful one, and then they merge into a big one, and then they lose, they splinter, and they rebuild. So this guy is really good at keeping your troops together while fighting factions that have fear and terror. You're going to see this a lot on some of the demons, the vampires, stuff like that. This just, your units will then ignore it. Greenskins are extraordinarily powerful of a faction in terms of killing things. And this guy is a great addition. He's worth bringing at least one of them. He's going to be able to fight, honestly, most other lords, even some most other heroes, and even some lords. He's a very good unit. Very good hero. Solid hero unit to use in your armies. Then we'll hit another goblin. These are your night goblins. These are an upgrade, ideally, from nasty skulkers. But overall, they're a bit better. They're still expendable. They don't have the bonus when they're opportunistic. So if they're winning, they don't get that huge melee attack bonus these guys do, boosting them around to 38. Instead, they stay at 26, but they do apply poison, which is generally just a pain to fight against. It weakens the attack, missile, speed, armor stuff. You use an attack from one of these on the enemy, and it will noticeably decrease the enemy's combat strength. This is a very good thing to bring in your army, especially if you're worried about fighting enemy lords. A 15% damage reduction on an enemy lord or hero is considerable, or even a powerful unit. Now, these things aren't great at killing, but they are expendable, and they do have some shields. There are other units in the Greenskins that apply poison, and sometimes you get heroes and stuff that give poison to your whole army, but these guys just get it at the base. They're decent. There's a couple factions that use goblins heavily. These are some of their stronger units. Next to that, you have orc biguns. They're bigger and odder. These guys hit hard. They do good damage. They're a very solid mid-tier infantry. The only thing they don't do is have shields to block range attacks. They have no special abilities. They don't really need it. You just throw them into the combat, and if they can kill them, they kill them. If they don't, they die. And then you have access to, let's see if I can get there. There we go. Night Goblin Archers. Again, a decrease in range. Decent missile strength, but they apply poison on their arrows. So these are, I would say, better than the orc archers, even with the reduced damage and the reduced range, because they can apply poison to a lot of enemies in quick succession. You hit the whole enemy army with poison arrows using a couple of these, just target each unit individually. You can systematically weaken whole areas of the enemies. Now, be aware poison doesn't last forever, but it has a decent enough duration that it's a legit tactic. And then you have the level 4 one. You have access to Night Goblin Fanatic Archers. So the Knight Goblin Fanatic Archers have access to a really terrifying ability. And I think all the high-level Knight Goblins do, and we'll cover that. Spinning Loons. This is basically they throw, as they say, a ball and chain in a direction. It does solid, hard damage. Total Warhammer 2. I haven't checked the comparison of stats, but this, if you use this, this could wipe out even top-tier infantry unit. It does a lot of quick, powerful damage in an area. You can use it 3 times, which is kind of crazy because it was very solid. I don't know how it compares. It's still really good if you use it properly. Hits the enemies in an area, will do large amounts of damage. Be aware that you have to use it before your hit points fall low. But flanking or with the enemy in melee combat, you come from the side, hit it, goes right through the side of the enemy, will kill or at least disrupt their formation heavily. These guys also have the poison missiles, still the reduced range, but overall are an upgrade from the Knight Goblin Archers, being fanatics. Then you have Knight Goblins Fanatics, who have the same Spinning Loon. They're an upgrade from Knight Goblins in general. Their combat stats don't improve, but other stuff does. Mainly the big thing is the addition of Spinning Looms. A good Greenskin player can be differentiated from a bad one based off, do you use Spinning Loons properly? And do you use it? And do you bring them to the battle in general? They're very useful. These guys are, again, expendable because they're goblins. So don't feel too bad sending them out, throwing the loons, then having them die. The only thing to be aware of is these are, even though they're expendable, they require a level 4 settlement to recruit, so don't throw them away as fast as you might other goblin units. And then you have access to the Black Orcs. This is a very important unit for the Greenskins army comps because it has armor penetrating. These are great axes. These things tear through enemy armor. This is one of the first units you will get, or one of your strongest units you will get, that can go toe-to-toe with Dwarven infantry with high armor and easily hold their own. In fact, they'll probably win. They are immune to psychology, which is nice, so you don't need to have a boss with them. Overall, very good unit. Hit hard, armor penetrating. Be aware they don't have anything to stop cavalry, though. That is a semi-weakness of the Greenskins, is fighting cav units, because really the only spearman unit you have is goblins, and they don't have charge damage reflect or anything, which makes it rather difficult for them to handle cav units. On the other hand, the Greenskins have cav units, and their cav is pretty good. So we've already talked about the Savage Orc Boar Riders, but now we'll get into the Wolf Riders. This one here is Wolf Riders with arrows. Archers on the back of your Wolf Riders. They're very fast. They're great at skirmishing. They don't do a ton of damage, and they're pretty bad versus armor, and their leadership is only 38, meaning these guys, they get 1 or 2 volleys on them from enemy archers, and they're gone. But they're good against armies that don't have range. Vampires, for example, have no range. They're half decent against them. Downside is the lack of armor penetration does hit hard. I can't say I really ever use them. On the other hand, you have the melee Wolf Riders, which have better leadership, decent attack, melee defense. They are expendable, which is nice because they tend to run away. Their leadership still isn't great, and their combat stats aren't either. But they are a fast-moving, reasonably heavy-hitting unit to kill archers and artillery if used properly. Then, as we go up here, we'll get to slightly better ones. You have Goblin Wolf Chariots. This is probably the type of unit you'd rather want to use rather than Goblin Wolf Riders. Overall, better leadership, some armor, better missile damage, better even range, and it's half decent in combat. There's 8 chariots. They're a pretty decent unit. I think there's better ones to bring, but they're definitely better than the Wolf Rider Archers. Then you have the Forest Goblin Spider Riders. So this is, you could say this is an upgrade from the Goblin Wolf Riders, and you'd be semi-right. Overall, they're a better unit. Be aware they are slower, though, which is an interesting thing for an upgrade. But they ignore terrain, they move fast, they do poison on their missiles, which is again a reoccurring theme for the Greenskins. Very weak against armor though. So against dwarves and stuff, not a great unit to bring. And then you have the melee forest goblin spider riders. Try saying that 5 times fast. In general, a better upgrade to the goblin wolf riders. Definitely slower, but overall will fight better and for longer with that leadership. And then finally, we have one of the craziest greenskin units. Probably one of my favorite iconic things to use is the greenskins. You get the Arachnarok spider. If you've ever had nightmares after watching Lord of the Rings with Shelob, don't play this unit because it's kind of the same type thing. You get a giant, hard-hitting, monstrous spider unit. It's a siege attacker, applies poison. This is the type of unit you send into the enemy lines and just doesn't die. Now, it does not have health regen unlike some of the other ones, but it really doesn't need it. It's a solid monster unit. You throw it in there, it will fight. It'll kill a fair amount of stuff. It's pretty good against other monsters, which is nice, or Cav. So, it's pretty good. And then over here, you have the boar rider units. Again, the level 1 isn't great. I would pick it over the goblin wolf riders any day, though. More expensive, obviously, though. Almost twice as expensive. Overall, a much better unit for its money. Will charge in. Doesn't have the greatest combat stats, but is a solid flanking cav unit. And that gets upgraded into orc boar chariots and orc boar biguns, which is the direct upgrade. Overall, better unit, better leadership, slightly better combat stats, better weapon damage and charge bonus. Anti-large, so it's good against other cav or monsters. And it's armor piercing, which is important to note that the orc boar boys are as well, unlike a fair amount of the other ones. And then you have the orc boar chariots, which is kind of an upgrade to the goblin wolf chariots. It doesn't have range though, so I guess you can't call it a direct upgrade. But solid cav unit, chariot cav unit. Hits hard, does decent damage, good leadership, good armor. It's good against trash units. It hits hard. It definitely disrupts enemy formations. It has a really decent entity size mass, so it knocks them back. Then you've got a very odd building here. You have squigs, which are kind of like mutant dogs. They're kind of weird. They're like mutant dogs. That's the only way I can describe them. They're very interesting because you got 2 different ones. You have Night Goblin Squig Hoppers, which is a fast-moving, decently hard-hitting cab unit. In some ways, I'd almost take it over the Orc Boar Boys, except they have better armor. Applies poison, is bonus versus infantry and a bonus versus armor. So this is actually a decent unit against playing as the Greenskins versus dwarves, because this is an armor-piercing unit and you can get it reasonably quickly. Use them, don't use them, try them out. Maybe you'll find you like the feel of them a little bit better than I do. I'm a little bit on the fence about them. And then the other one is a Squig Herd, which is a very similar unit. It's less expensive though, so it's kind of like the cheap goblin version compared to an orc version. Tier 1, oddly enough, it takes a tier 3 building to build. I could see this getting reworked at a lower level. Decent unit. Squigs go wild. If there's enemies nearby, they get a good leadership, which is cool. They will go on a rampage where they'll just randomly attack. But overall, half decent unit. Can kill archers with ease. Can even do some decent damage against armored infantry. And guess what? We're still only halfway through the Greenskins. They have a very large roster of units. Now we get into some of the more cool stuff. So here we have the troll monster line. So your base ones are trolls. They have good regeneration. They're armor piercing, which is definitely makes them a necessity early on if you're going to fight a lot of dwarves. Depending on your faction. Anything with armor, they're really good against. Be aware, though, they have very low leadership, so you should not send them off on their own. They should be used inside other units or surrounded by your units to help them fight. This is definitely one of the things where you would want to bring a Black Orc Big Boss for that the removal of psychology in an area. so that they don't get hit by a single spell and run away. Especially the vampires, Doom and Darkness is a very legitimate strategy to hit them with. They regenerate, which makes them last a lot longer than you think you would. Flaming attacks does reduce regeneration, so just be aware of that. Overall, a good unit. Definitely outclassed by the upgrades, but for the price and the upkeep and the time at which you get it, pretty good. Now we've got the Giant River Troll Hag, which is a spellcaster hero with regeneration, which is kind of interesting. They have access to a vast variety of spells, and they're all pretty good. They're the Doom and Darkness, Lore of Death stuff. Purple Son of Xerxes is just fun to use. They also have access to a Swamp Breast magic missile, which can be very powerful for range damage. It's definitely worth trying to get off the casts of it before combat. And they have this Mither, which can really slow down enemies trying to run away from them or others. And they are also a siege attacker. So they've got some pretty cool stuff. The cool thing is the regeneration. It means as a spellcaster, they're a little bit harder to destroy than others because they've got good stats, decent combat stats, but that regeneration is really nice. Then we've got two different type of trolls. We have the river trolls, which are kind of cool. They have overwhelming odor, which reduces melee attack. So bringing one or two of these, sticking them in the middle of your line and just weakening the entire enemy is really fun. They also cause fear, so not only is this a melee attack, but also a leadership debuff having these around. They regenerate, which is quite nice. Decent stats. They are armor piercing still, so you should definitely still use them that way. And then we've got the stone trolls. So the stone trolls are similar to the river trolls, slightly less combat stats. It's a 32 melee attack versus a 36. Weapon strength wise, they are significantly better. So overall, stone trolls over the river trolls, but the river trolls provide a debuff. So they each have their place in your armies. These guys are resistant to spells, resistant to missiles. They're not resistant to melee damage, but they do have regeneration, and they have decent armor and good armor piercing. They're a great unit to deploy against dwarves. I say that a lot. It's because several factions of the Greenskins will be fighting dwarves early on. And then finally at the top, we have the Giant. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a single, monstrous, gigantic unit. Hits hard, does not move particularly fast, has good leadership for a monster unit. Doesn't move fast, though. Can, interestingly enough, destroy walls, which means not only is it a siege attacker like others, but it can just bash the way through the enemy walls like a catapult, destroying them completely rather than having to break down gates, for example. Very high melee attack. Not a great charge bonus, but you don't need it. Good melee attack. You're going to hit a fair amount of the time. Not the best armor and melee defense, but it's pretty good. Doesn't regenerate, but does cause terror. So be aware, archers are a danger to this unit. A little bit less because they have missile resistance, but still, if the enemy archers focus this unit, they can blast it down reasonably fast because it's not that good against met range. Overall, though, a really good unit. I highly recommend bringing this. It will dominate its area of battle. Just watch out for enemy lords and archers. Those are the two weaknesses of it. Now we're getting into the Greenskins engineering. So the Greenskins, similar to the dwarves and some of the humans, have access to machinery. In fact, the Greenskins machinery, according to the lore, is pretty bad. It kind of works because of the power of positive thinking rather than any engineering skills. The first one is a snotling pump wagon, which just sounds disgusting. It has the access to a bonus to charge and movement, and it knocks enemies back in a substantial way with this bonus. Moves fast, charges hard, does not have the best combat stats, so don't leave it in melee combat for long, but it is expendable if you use it. It does armor pierce, it does move decently fast. It's really more of an annoyance for the enemy than anything that will win the battle for you, though. But for a level 1, or for a level 2 settlement, level 1 building, pretty good. Then you've got the upgrade, which is the snotling pump wagons with the spiky rollers. the naming, of course, is totally original here. They have access to, they are unstoppable, first off. They are going to hit hard. They are going to push the enemy back. They are very good at that. They have this unique melee attack where they sunder the enemy's armor. So if you use them on armored enemies, you can really damage the armor so that other units can rush in and kill them. This could allow stuff like your Black Orc Big Guns and others to do much better against armored factions like dwarves. They're really good at that. Overall, decent unit. Tier 3, despite being a Tier 2 building, which is kind of cool. And then you have access to the Snotling pump wagons with the flappas. So the actual difference here is one has the sundering attacks and better melee attack. The other one has a better charge bonus and worse leadership, basically. This one you want to use for longer terms in melee combat. This one you'd want to charge in, charge out, charge in, charge out. It's a very interesting difference between those two. I would go personally with the ones with the spiky rollers, but hey, spiky rollers sound cool. Then you get access to catapults. Now, they're not the most accurate thing in the game, although if you get into them and micro control them, you can be pretty accurate. Pretty standard catapult unit, good distance, not as great range as others, but it's armor piercing. It's worth bringing. Great against units in formation, so dwarves, again, repeating the dwarves because armor formation is kind of the dwarves thing. Interesting enough, it's an expendable unit because it's powered by goblins, which is just kind of strange, but it's nice if your artillery gets flanked and wiped out, you don't get penalized for it, which is kind of convenient. And then you get, which is probably one of the most crazy things in the game, you get Doom Diver catapults. So this is basically a suicide catapult thing. Basically, they fire goblins that have like base jumping wings attached to them. They home in the enemies and then they die. But they hit hard and they are guided projectiles. So they home in on the enemy, and if you command it, you can steer the projectile. It's rather unique. Much more accurate than your standard catapult, which makes this unit very worthwhile bringing 1 or 2 to battles. I've never seen them get under a couple hundred kills in a battle, except fighting monsters. They're good. Be aware neither of these catapults can hold up in melee combat. This one is not expendable, though. Just be aware of that. Now let's get into the other one here. We have the Shamans. This is the Night Goblin Shamans. Has access to the very odd greenskin magic tree. The little Wog magic tree. They've got a variety of spells. We'll look a little bit more at later when we look at Wurrzag himself, because he has access to these. You have Night Goblins, and then you have Orcs. The biggest difference here is they have slightly access to slightly different spells. This one is more the little Wog, and then he has access to the big Wog. Actually, Wurrzag only has access to the big Wog. Overall, I like the big Wog spells better. The smaller Wog spell is more about debuffs. The larger spell is more about buffs, so it's a matter of personal preference. Some people, and I know quite a few of them, will claim that debuffing the enemy is more important than buffing yours, in which case, if you're a believer of that, Night Goblin's the way to go. If you like buffing units, Orc Shaman. Level 2 doesn't do too much, but I will mention the building here because it does give global recruitment capacity up and local recruitment capacity up. There are not many buildings in the game that give a global recruitment capacity increase that you can just build everywhere. You can get tons of global recruitment slots. And in general, local recruitments for Greenskins, pretty good if you're recruiting units before declaring a WOG. And then at the top, we have the Rogue Idol. This is a very strange unit. I can't say I've used it too much. It's a monster unit. It's powerful. It's very slow at attacking. Great leadership, great armor, causes terror. If you want to read the descriptions, it's basically the god of brutal cunning or cutting brutality in an idol form. It's got access to something that really I've only ever seen something similar to on the Lizardman Croak Lord. It's different. It's a bombardment thing that they use consistently that boosts armor piercing but reduces armor. It's really quite strange. It's hard to explain exactly how you use it, but it's really kind of cool to use because it's a permanent duration. So once you start using it, you're gonna keep using it, and it changes as the hit points fall. Um, it can damage your allies. Be aware of it. Basically, it gets used when you start taking damage. Your unit starts to collapse and hit things around it. Basically, which makes sense because it's basically a walking rock pile. It does provide leadership across the entire map, which is interesting, but only if the hit points are greater than 25, so it's not collapsing. But it's a nice leadership bonus to all your greenskins. Since greenskins do most of their damage in melee combat, having additional leadership will keep them in the fight longer. It's also unbreakable, which is kind of odd. Um, Overall, just be aware that you don't want it to collapse around your units. Ideally, if it's going to collapse, send it into the enemy so they take the damage, basically. And then we have one last to cover, and this is the Goblin Big Boss Melee Specialist, which is slightly different than the Black Orc Big Boss. This is a Goblin unit. It's a bit more about killing enemy heroes than the Black Orc, which is buffing the allies. And the reason is it's got this They Need Stabbin', which reduces melee defense and armor on a lord, allowing for you to damage it much faster than you would normally. And it has, yeah, let's see, I can stay at Slippery, which gives you a huge speed boost and melee defense boost as well. So this allows you to chase people, get in better position, chase down lords, or you just use it while in melee combat to give your unit a nice melee defense buff. I mean, 24 on top of 48, that's 72 melee defense, meaning for that 25 seconds you have it up, your unit is very hard to hit and very good at dueling enemy lords and heroes. And that is the Greenskins roster. It's large. It's largely associated around melee combat. You'll notice they have archers, but they're weak. So instead, if you're going to use range, you need artillery. Good amount of monster units. In fact, I think it has the most monster units in the game, this retinue, although lizardmen are probably, depends how you define the lizardmen stuff. And decent cav, but their core is a strong infantry line that holds, and then cav that flanks, backed up by a couple monster units that are just powerhouses on the battlefield. And I will point out that you want lords. In fact, you want high-level lords and heroes because their lords and heroes are really good at fighting. Level 20 lords and heroes are really powerful on the battlefield. Okay, let's talk technology. So the Greenskins technology tree is probably one of my less favorite ones. It's rather difficult to follow, with several points of it being locked off behind either spending money or paying scrap. But by and large, there's three initially separate trees. You've got your middle tree here, which is about goblins. This makes your goblin units significantly better. They're still not great, I will say. But it's pretty a necessary buff for these if you're ever going to use them. Besides, you're going to want to bring plenty of goblins to battle, either as a secondary reinforcing army, similar to the Tomb Kings or Vampires. Sometimes you need more units to win than better quality units. And this just makes those relatively trashy units that much stronger. But it does have some bonuses for orcs in the middle here. It does give physical resistance for goblin units, which makes them be expendable meat shield tanks even better. And it has a very needed side trip here to control. +3 control is not to be underestimated. It is definitely one of the few techs that gives public order, and the Greenskins they don't have huge public order problems, but this just eliminates them to a very large degree. And pulling teeth here gives you some income. And then this here is really kind of funny. It basically makes all your goblins have Vanguard deployment become dirt cheap to take. And they basically, you can just create a miniature weak goblin horde. Giant Wog, basically. Then up top is interesting. This is kind of your movement cav tree. You'll see stuff for, movement range, some scrap upgrades for goblins, which is nice. Boost your goblins, boost spider, wolf riders type stuff, makes them a little stronger. Reduces attrition from casualties. But the big prize up here is Healy mushrooms. The Greenskins have one of their few weaknesses is army replenishment. So they need this tech. In fact, I don't want to say this should be your first tech target, but it definitely should be second, if not first. If you're going to use goblins, you want to grab the goblin techs early on when they're still vaguely useful. If you want growth, you want to get Go Bigger. In fact, I would probably say Go Bigger should be your first tech. Just 10 growth, higher, better settlements, always a good thing. And then you might want to just beeline Healy mushrooms. All told, 18 18 or so turns. You'll have 2 very decent techs, and then you can kind of go where you want. Up above here, more scrap upgrades. The scrap upgrades for night goblins and stuff can be pretty crazy. They're decent. Plus the additional melee strength means those weak archers become better. And it does give you access to a legendary lord, Spiderclaw, which is nice because the Greenskins, I think overall they can get the most legendary lords offhand. Yeah, because they've got lots of legendary lord factions, and then with these 2 added in. Having immortal lords is always a good thing, especially if you're going to risk dying. This is also a huge buff to spider units as well. And then down here, similar tree. This is all about the orcs, scrap upgrades worth grabbing. If you're playing as Wurrzag, who uses savage orcs a lot, casualty replenishment for them is really good. Stacking that with Healy mushrooms, you could have 15 plus replenishment on them without any hero or lord effects. You can use boar orc riders. These are good. This one is just a really nice tech. Not many techs give you general decreased building costs, which is really cool. And then again, access to another legendary lord. This guy is all about boar riders. So if you bring him, expect to be using boar riders and orcs. Spiders, orcs. Really no goblins there. Up top here, you've got upgrades. And this is the cool thing. You get scrap upgrades for your catapults. So don't forget to use them once you get this tech. More money from raiding, more money from sacking. Over here, heroes, then trolls, then Gork and Mork. Honestly, this is probably a pretty useless tech, which is why they added the hero recruitment cost. Diplomatic relations with others factions. Everybody has an aversion to you, basically, as the Greenskins. This is not going to help much. But the Greenskins are a semi-order untainted faction, so late game, you might be able to get some non-aggression packs with well, probably not with dwarves, but with high elves or humans or lizardmen, because you'll be fighting chaos if you have the chaos invasion disaster coming. In that sense, it might be useful, but overall, unless you're going to use lots of heroes, not that handy. Beyond counting, more global recruitment capacity. You can recruit your best units almost anywhere in the world as the Greenskins. Be aware that it is more expensive, but the Greenskins have plenty of ways of making more money. And then they get a general upkeep decretion. Be aware that you do have to complete both of these legendary lords, so both trees to this point, basically, in order to go down this middle tree, which is why it's so powerful. Then you get a scrap upgrade for your giant spider. It's really cool. Definitely check it out once you get there. Down here, magic. It works. And in general, a corruption of -3 called Stranger Danger. The new rule of murdering anyone we don't recognize is working well, I think. You don't have too many corruption problems, but this will help you with them. Down here, upgrades for squigs, night goblins, and black orcs. Again, always good. Better lords. General recruitment rank is always a good tech, so definitely get this one at some point. Probably before you go down these miniature side trees. Scrap compactor gives you scrap, but look at everything you have to research to get there late game. And then the biggest wag just means this reputation every 20 turns at minimum, you're going to be getting a wag, at which point you can conquer the world really fast as these guys. It's pretty crazy. Enjoy the Greenskins. tech tree, because although it is slightly annoying with some of its locks behind scrap and money, it's a very powerful tech tree the later you get in it. So let's talk legendary lords. And I'm going to start here with Wurrzag, the Great Green Prophet, for two reasons. First off, he's the most similar in starting location and stuff to the Total Warhammer 1 and 2 areas. Before it was Grimgor Ironhide, who isn't here anymore. Wurzag's the only one left in this Karrak 8 Peaks Badlands area. He is all about the Savage Orcs. We've already mentioned he has a chance to get Savage Orcs in his WoG. Enemy heroes have a very low success rate against his faction, which is kind of handy. Not that the AI is particularly good at using heroes, but against other players can be quite handy. And his Savage Orcs get a huge charge bonus. It almost doubles it, meaning his faction is really all about just charging into the enemies and fighting. That's buffed even more by his actual trait here, the Great Green Prophet. Upkeep 50% for Savage Orcs. Recruitment costs -50. Physical resistance +20. And then you get Wurzag's WoG. So these guys, 45 physical resistance. Half almost of any physical damage you take, these units resist. They are amazing in melee combat. The only thing that is worth mentioning is they do not do well against armor. They do not have armor piercing on the Savage Orc units, except for the Savage Orc Boar Boys. So if you're going to fight dwarves with this guy, you might want a couple Savage Orc Boar Boys in your army to do it. Even their archers, 45 physical resistance. Wurrzag can further buff that with his personal line here, plus 8 melee attack, plus another 12 charge bonus. Same thing for Cav. This one is really powerful because it enables magic attacks and removes any magic resistance. So rather than worrying about the enemy having armor and physical resistance, you pretty much just ignore that because now you're doing magic damage with all your melee units and ranged units and everything. I think overall, Wurrzag has the strongest armies of the Greenskins. Some people might dispute that, but this single skill alone is very powerful. Then he has buffs to speed, melee defense, and perfect vigor, meaning he can keep kind of running away from the enemy. He was not going to be able to outmove Cav, but against infantry, he can get away pretty well. Colossal Warpaint. This gives the physical resistance that he was giving to his army, which, by the way, he buffs by another 5, making it 50 on Savage Orcs. Now he gives physical resistance to trolls, giants, giant spiders, and rogue idols. If you were concerned about trolls, giants, and spiders dying, this now makes them, I won't say immune in melee combat, because they will still die. It makes them significantly better. It's not like it's a flat 20% boost. It's higher. And in general, physical resistance to the whole army, that's not just 20 to the trolls and giants, it's in fact 25 because the physical resistance applies as well. And now his Savage Orcs only take half physical damage, meaning the only real weakness he has is magic damage to his army, because they ignore physical resistance. So spells. Titanic Beat makes his spells of Big Wog even easier to use. He also gets access to an Iron Pig mount, which now that he has that and Wild Feet, he can just keep running away from almost anything while casting spells. He is probably one of the better spellcasters in the game, which is really weird to think about. Mainly because he doesn't die in melee combat as easy as other ones. In general, though, he also has a couple other minor abilities. This Warpaint, physical resistance to allies in an area around him. Stationed behind your lines, that's not half physical resistance fully upgraded. It's now 55%. Wurzag's Revenge. This increases the miscast chance significantly of enemy spells. So as I said, his weakness is spells. This means enemy spellcasters have a lot harder time casting the spells. Against someone like Techless, who uses spells a lot, this can be pretty painful. Now, in terms of spells, he has access to a variety of the Greenskin spells. He has Magic Missile spell. That's pretty good. Does magic damage. Pretty cheap to cast. Power of the Wog. Power recharge when cast. Always a good thing to snag if you want to keep casting spells. Brain Bursters. Armor piercing magic spells. Be aware. Reasonably high miscast chance. Can be annoying, but if you cast it, can do some pretty good damage to enemies in an area. Large explosion, they're not kidding. It's pretty decent. It's not massive, but it will definitely hit one unit. If they're stacked, it could hit 2 or 3. Pretty solid. Fists of Gork. This is an interesting one that you're going to want to use early if you're fighting like dwarves, which you probably will. It gives magic attacks to a unit, and it also buffs their melee attack and defense significantly. So as Wurrzag, if you throw this down on his Savage Orc Biguns, they will tear through stuff. They will not become a tier 2 or tier 1 infantry. Now they'll be tier 3. And it has a good duration. It's 35 seconds of combat. And it's got a low duration in 21 seconds too. Just be aware that it does cost Winds of Magic, and it's hard to discount. Then you have Edbutt. Another solid spell. This is a tier spell, so you cast it, kind of radiates out in an area. Armor piercing, not really, but it's pretty decent at killing enemies. Here we go. This is a huge buff in an area to your units, giving them melee attack. Doesn't give them the melee and physical, the melee defense and the magic attacks, but it can hit multiple allies in the area. So if you put this on units right before they crash into the enemies or as they're fighting, big boost to their combat ability. Your front line will, in general, tear through the enemy front line during that 38 seconds you have it cast. Then you've got a very interesting spell here, Foot of Gork. Be aware Titanic Beast makes it cheaper. So this is not 26. It's, by the time you get to this, it's probably 17 or so. Even if you upcast it, it'll still be 15 or so. This can be a very strong unit if you use it well. You basically summon a version of the Orc God's Foot to stomp on the enemies. Good damage, reasonable range, armor piercing. It's worth using multiple times in a battle if you have the Winds of Magic for it. Then you got your standard base miscast chance. Be aware, he's got a decent miscast chance on both his spells. So this is definitely one you'd want to snag. Magic reserves gives you a reserve of magic. Arcane Conduit, better recharge. He's definitely the spellcaster of the Greenskin Lords, and he does a decent job at it. Outside of that, he's got a pretty standard blue line. I will point out the Greenskins do not have a replenishment in their blue line, which makes it significantly weaker. They do get corruption reduction and ambush chance, which is kind of nice. So they can become really good at ambushing the enemies, which is good for when you're not wogging on the enemies. Makes you a lot harder to invade. I still would recommend going down the blue line for Wurrzag to start. But it's not as needed as other lords, because if you use Savage Orcs, your army's cheap anyway. But once you start moving away from Savage Orcs, getting the decreased upkeep is really nice. But overall, it's worth getting Route Marcher. Depending on what you're using, if you're sacking, if you're looting, if you're raiding, snag those. Ironhide is pretty good because it boosts your lords in the army. And if Wurrzag dies, he'll come back sooner, which is always a solid thing to have. Then outside of that, I wouldn't go really heavily down his red line. It's up to you, because you can get some nice boosts to your infantry units. But there is no buff to the savages outside of this general orcs boost. There's nothing special for savage orcs. Let's put it that way. It's still a good buff. Melee attack, melee defense, missile damage, reload time. It's worth getting. I wouldn't get it early on. As Wurrzag, I'd rather have his spellcasting abilities. And then obviously this huge buff to them. This is something to clear up later once he hits like level 30. Snag that. If you can get to some of these last ones here, the Our Lads ward save for orc units, melee defense, and armor, you can get a half decent amount of armor on his savage orcs, like 20, 30. They become a lot better in combat. He has some interesting quests, and in fact, part of his victory conditions is to get these. Um, Overall, they give him more spells on average or different abilities. Passive one, this one. Effect range map, 17 seconds, buffs your entire unit. Once you get this, you want to cast the spell before you charge into the enemy lines every battle. It's really good. It also lowers his base miss chance to very low. Overall, these are honestly some of the better quests for unique units in the game, in my opinion. They give good, decent combat stats, corruptions, or boosts compared to some other of the quests. These are decent. It's worth doing. You need them for his victory condition. You have to control the Badlands, Western, Southern, and then Eastern over here. And outside of that, you just have to complete the quests and sack and raise 30 settlements, which using wogs is not hard. So that is Wurrzag. Let's go to what used to be the main Greenskin Lord, Grimgor Ironhide. Okay, here we are as Grimgor Ironhide. And we're not starting turn 1, so I'll have to explain that. You start in control of Saber Mountain here with your standard first battle and then Ice Spear. Oh, I just realized I didn't explain the Wurrzag stuff. Oops. Well, I'm going to go back to that. Sorry. Okay, sorry about that. Here we are back as Wurrzag the Great Green Prophet. So first off, I want to point out that the power of the Wog is such that when I cast it, I put on the dwarf Thormgrim Grubsberg capital, and since then I've conquered all of this, and we still have half the Wog to go. So in terms of starting moves for Wurrzag, and if you go back a few minutes, you'll see that you have a starting battle, and then you have Dragon Horde Mines. If you micro the battle, you want to go do Dragon Horde Mines turn 1 and win that battle because it's the enemy Greenskins leader. If you do, you will be able to confederate his province and gain the Lord, which can be kind of nice. Otherwise, you have to hunt him down, which can take a little while. If not, you don't fight it, auto-resolve. Make sure you stay in your lands, recruit units, then take Dragonhorn Mine. He'll probably retreat, so then you'll have to take Bitterstone Mine. It'll take you a little bit longer, but you'll have more troops. Be aware that you probably are going to want to disband or combine units and then just recruit new ones rather than waiting the turns for them to heal. Even if you go down the tree to Healy Mushrooms here, it's still going to take you quite a few turns to get them going so that your orcs heal in 1 to 2 turns. 4 to 5 is pretty normal. Afterwards, you've got a choice. You can go south. If you go south, be aware you are going to run into the Exiles of Khorne and Beastmen. You can beat them. Orcs do very well against Skarbrand and his ilk. But if you go north, you will run across the dwarves. Now, the odds are you will probably end up going north because the dwarves will declare war on you. Over here, you'll have Belagar Ironhammer will eventually expand into this area. You've got Thormgrim Grudgebearer up here. And right here, you've got Barak Var. So Barak Var is the easiest one to eliminate. Be aware their garrisons are hard to take out without 2 armies. You're probably going to want 2 armies or you're going to suffer quite a few Pyrrhic victories. Dwarves are a pain to invade. That's counting them without garrison buildings in them. Around that time, you start fighting Barak Var. There will be another orc faction, Greenskin, in between. You'll probably want to wipe them out. Otherwise, Barak Var will become harder to kill. You'll probably want to go with war to them, take out Barak Var as soon as you can, get another capital settlement, try and reinforce it so it doesn't fall. At the same time, you'll probably get attacked by Thormgrim and Belagar if he's very quick. There is, I will mention prior to this, there isn't a ogre faction here who has a settlement here. Take him out. There's no reason to leave him alive. He'll raid your lands, kill him, take his camp, and he'll be dead. He doesn't occupy any provinces usually. Then once you've done that, probably declare the war on Karaz Akarak, mainly because once you take it, Thormgrim becomes way less threatening. Be aware, his army by this point is really hard to kill. I'm not kidding. In 1-to-1 combat, my army here of savage orcs with decent melee physical resistance, when I played further, I needed the Wog and the garrison to beat him with relative ease. That he is not to be underestimated. And on that same note, don't underestimate Belagar Ironhammer, especially if he has his ghostly ancestors in his army. They are extraordinarily hard to kill without that magical attack ability that you get from Wurrzag's tree. This is why you want to get Fury of the Prophet, because once you bring in Thormgrim's ghostly ancestors are a joke. I mean, they really are. They're no longer, their physical resistance of 55 is almost entirely negated and they die pretty quickly. Be aware sometimes you'll have issues with the ogres up here. I haven't had them because they've been busy fighting Thormgrim at this point. Snag, Azhag, Karak, get over here. Try to get Mount Squindhorn before Skarsnik does. Skarsnik, of course, is up here in Mount Gunbad. He actually makes a decent ally. So if you can, try an ally or at least non-aggression pack him. He tends not to betray that. I don't know why, but if you do fight him, beat him in battle, and then you can confederate him. You'll probably be too busy hunting the dwarves. They tend to run away and conquer stuff. Black Crag is a very nice prize once you get it, because you get a strategic, unique building, and it's also a gold mine. If you're having any income problems between Black Rock, Black Crag, you'll make enough money. Over here is the Crooked Moon Mutinous Gits. You can conquer this. You have Skarsnik, Thormgrim, and Queek Headtaker all coming for this province. You can get it first. It's not as big of an advantage for you, but it's still a pretty nice province to hold with the unique strategic location. For them, just be aware it's not going to be as useful for you. It's still worth it. These guys don't expand. They won't help you in defensive wars. They're very easy to ally, though. And once you've hit this point, you want to try and finish off Thormgrim if you can. He's just an absolute pain to leave alive, especially if he's in Black Crag with a gold mine. He'll be able to recruit 2 armies out of it. Finish him off. You may have to divert another army over here to deal with Belagar. He is extraordinarily hard to ambush from his various effects and other bonuses. So the odds of you actually ambushing him are low. If you do, you can wipe him out. Once his first army is destroyed, he won't really be able to rebuild this to the level he started with. So easily, especially if you're in a WOG, you should be able to overrun his outer provinces. You might even be able to eliminate him. You can. Karak Izor is the prize. Zarak Zeal is his capital at the start. Karak Izor is a really good province because put a garrison in it and it will control this pass. And it will give you some decent money as well. And it just general will hold the area. Be wary, though, if you cross up here to fight him in Migdal von Barak, because the Empire will tend to come after you. As you'll see, they're already coming. It's much easier to just control Eckendorf here, fortify it, and kill him off and raise the settlements, or just take them and then lose them to the Empire. The Empire does not have underway stance, so they have to march through one of these 2 passes to come to you, which will subdue your northern border much faster. These guys here, they don't do anything. Sometimes they'll declare war on you. If they don't, try and be friends with them. You really don't want the Magic Forest province. You can take it. It's uninhabitable to you, so you have huge penalties about owning it. And once you subdue this area, you can go to all the effort of taking out all the other dwarves. Once you kill off Ironhammer, you'll probably run across any other dwarves. You can fight them. You can leave them alive and go south. If you go south, you'll be fighting Skarbrand, Beastmen, and over here, this will be Clanmore's Skaven. You'll rip through the Skaven, a little bit harder for the other factions. I think this is one of the easiest starts. I mean, we're 40 turns in and I'm already dominating the area. It's pretty fun. Anyway, back to Grimgor Ironhide. Okay, Grimgor Ironhide, take 2. So Grimgor Ironhide was the kind of default Greenskin Lord before, along with Wurrzag for a while, and then Grimgor became the default one. He has since moved. He was way over here before. Now he's returned to an area where there's not many other unique factions. There is one up here, which we'll talk about later, the Heralds of the Tempest. Outside of that, there's almost no special legendary lords in the close vicinity, which means once you survive your initial challenges, you'll be able to overrun the whole area. So let's go with the starting moves. So you start with Saber Mountain, fighting initial battle for Ice Spear. Win the battle. Probably don't take Ice Spear unless you manually fought the first battle. Stay in your lands, recruit troops, take out Ice Spear. It shouldn't have an army, shouldn't reinforce. Keep moving over. Once you get towards Blizzard Peak, you should see the leader of a Greenskin faction in there when you're fighting. He also owns Granite Spikes usually as well, meaning if you defeat him in Blizzard Peaks, you'll get Granite Spikes. I recommend confederating him. It's up to you. Once you confederate him, make sure you're raising a second army, because almost inevitably Kolic, Sun Eater of the Warriors of the Tempest, will declare war on you, and he will take either Blizzard Peak or Granite Spikes. I recommend leaving Grimgor in Blizzard Peak so you don't lose your starting region, and especially the Edict, because the Greenskins have 3 edicts, and they're all good. This one, Growth, Control, Corruption, honestly one of the best edicts in the game. This one right here, Recruitment Cost and Recruitment Capacity, always good. Greenskins like a big army. This one, cheaper construction and income. If you need income, this is the way to get it. Not a huge issue on the Greenskins, in my opinion. Money does not appear to be one of their problems. And in fact, I realize I haven't talked about economy. Boy, this guide's a mess. We'll finish Grimgor, then we'll do economy. So Grimgor Ironhide is himself probably one of the strongest lords in the game. His faction is about using Black Orc big bosses, and you can recruit them from anywhere without a building. Just be mindful of capacity. Your WOG gets Black Orcs, you move further. You have decreased upkeep for Black Orcs and Big Guns units. This is fine. Black Orcs are monstrously strong. Black Orcs are good as well. In the meantime, you'll probably have to settle with Orc Boys, army of Goblin Archers or Orc Archers, backed up by some other units. You do start with a Black Orc big boss. Don't lose him. He's really good. Grimgor himself, okay? And we'll talk about this other stuff. Every Greenskin Lord has a unique WOG that you get while you're in battle as an army ability. Once you get enough kills, you can use it. Grimgor's makes your army ridiculously strong. You attack harder. You attack better. Once you use this, if the enemy wasn't already losing the battle, it was a tie, they'll be losing the battle after this. His personal stats are nuts. He has really good melee attack. He has really good weapon damage, and his armor is almost off the charts. Now, be aware we've improved it by 20, but it starts at 120, and he starts with magical attacks, I believe. No, he doesn't. We've got a weapon on there. He starts off with a really good attack and good weapon strength, which you improve immediately. This is one of the few lords in the game where you might want to start going down his yellow line. You want to get Route Marcher, obviously. Movement's amazing. Then you want to get probably his yellow line. His green line, with the lack of replenishment, is poor. Ironheart is good on him so that he heals in between battles. Not a huge necessity. Grimgor Ironhide is probably one of the few lords who will single-handedly win you battles. You can send him into the middle of the enemy line, and he can pretty much kill the whole army by himself. Only dangers are lords, magic spells, stuff like that. Magic weapons, magic attacks can be dangerous because he's got great armor. He doesn't have magic resist. So power him up, weapon strength, combat strats. He doesn't have any defense at the beginning. That's fine. Once you get to here, definitely snag hard to hit. Increased melee defense makes his armor and health go even further. And then in general, snagging Unbreakable is crazy. Since he's already a monstrous melee combatant, making him unbreakable just means he'll kill almost everything on the map before going down, if he goes down at all. It's quite common to win a battle, and he will be literally the only thing left standing in your army, besides any range units. Then, his personal line, best of the best, ward save, melee defense to allies in the area, especially if there's no lords or heroes in the area. So unless you're fighting a lord or hero, he gets a huge boost to himself and people around him. Black Orc Wrecking Ball. His Black Orc's armor piercing, charge damage, bigger, harder, leadership, bonus versus large. This is a very powerful one for the Greenskins, because as I mentioned earlier, they struggle a bit with cav and monster killing. This makes that problem go away. Imposing Presence, Fear or Tear, always great. Vitamin Shrooms, more hit points. From the front, faster, hits harder. Considering how armored and healthy he is, getting his leadership higher than 50% of the base, he is unbreakable. This is not a problem. It's really powerful. And then Hatred here just makes his weapon strength even stronger. If you want, and it's not a bad idea, snagging missile resistance is good. It negates the only danger he has, 25. Spells will still be an issue, but outside of that, you're pretty hard to kill. Once you've done the yellow line and his personal line, you can go down the blue line. Getting Ironhide will make him replenish more, but it's quite viable to go and get the boys to make him stronger and the big lads to boost your monsters, and then just keep going. There's very little subtlety with this guy. He goes in first, he kills things, his army charges in behind him. So, I mentioned it earlier, and this is Kolik Sun Eater is your main problem. Kolik is a monster combatant. He is right up there challenging Grimgor for some of the strongest lords in combat in the game. He is quite capable of winning a battle on his own in an army. Grimgor and him, it's an interesting matchup because he's armor piercing, so is Grimgor, so their armor becomes less useful, and so it goes down to a battle of weapon strength and attack. From what I found, Grimgor wins that battle, especially with backup, but it's quite capable for Kolik to win it as well. He doesn't have as many boosts to his personal combat as Grimgor can get. His weapon strength can exceed Kolik's early on. But just be aware that Kolik is a strong, powerful lord. And his army, starting army, isn't great. His dragon ogres are terrifying, and he has a cannon. Outside of that, he's going to have trash units. Don't underestimate him. Seriously, don't. One-on-one combat, if we hover over it, it's still almost even. And his army has half its health because he took my garrison out. You're probably going to need an ambush or a second army to kill him. Once you do, he's really just going to own the challenge stone unless he colonizes. If he colonizes, by all means, march in and wipe him out while his units are replenishing. If he doesn't, take challenge stone, wipe him out. He's gone. Usually the Norska to the north will make peace with you. Be aware, though, this is Chaos Wastes. Even the Greenskins can't live in the Chaos Wastes. You should still take and hold challenge stone and throw a public order and a corruption reduction building it and a garrison, and it should stop any invasions from the Chaos Wastes for some time. Afterwards, you've got your choices. You can go east, fight your way through the ogres and then into Cathay areas. You can go south and fight more ogres, which is kind of what the game wants you to do, because these are all the same wastelands you have. You can head west, fight your way through other greenskins and ogres, and conquer the rest of the wastes. For your personal victory conditions, you need to control a variety of places. They're scattered all over the map. I'm not kidding. Most of them, though, are over here near where Wurrzag started. So you should probably go south and then start heading west. If you go to war with Skarsnik or Wurrzag, if you take out their lord, chance of confederation, you ideally want to confederate as many greenskin factions as you can of the legendary levels, because legendary lords are hard to come by and very powerful. Saber Mountain here, if you stick a garrison building in it, the orcs have a decent garrison. It should stop any invasions from the west for some time. The AI seems to have some issue navigating through here, which will give you time to consolidate it. If you take challenge stone and armor, it should stop invasions from two sides. Then you can focus either east or down. If you take the Volary over here and even push further to Fortress of Eyes, which I don't really recommend because this is Chaos Waste, you can easily fortify that. Otherwise, through garrisons in these, you can reconquer stuff. It's just not worth the effort. Greenskin garrisons are pretty solid. And that's kind of Grimgor. Since we're here on Grimgor, though, we're going to talk economy. So I skipped technology earlier, and I apologize. I don't want to go through the effort of trying to re-edit all of the video and move it around, so we'll cover economy here. The Greenskin economy is good. Now, I rarely say an economy's good in this game. If you've watched my other guides, I usually whine or complain about the various problems factions have with their economy. Not so much with the Greenskins. The Greenskins have a really good building. They have this building called Pile of Shiny Stuff. Builds in 1 turn, gives you 250 gold. It costs 250 gold. It repays itself in 1 turn. You want to stick this everywhere you can. Even if it lasts 2 turns, it's going to repay your money. Obviously, the cost gets less efficient as you level it up to the point that it's full upgrade of your economy building takes 2 turns to rebuild. It takes 3 to build. It's really good. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of income boosting buildings for the Greenskins, but 500 gold is substantial considering your maintenance cost for an Orc Boy with Grimgor is 108. It almost supports 5 whole units. 2 or 3 of them can support an entire army. The Greenskins have no real economy problems played properly, especially because they should be raiding, sacking, and fighting. They'll get the income from battles. Next to that, standard growth building. Unlike other factions, you're going to want to build this not really for the growth, but for the replenishment. As I said, Greenskins suffer on replenishment. They're all about charging out, dying, coming back, rebuilding, charging out, and dying again. This will allow your units to heal faster. Good on defense. Pretty good even to support offense. The base 2% is more than what you would have before. And then you have the boss's tent. This is how the Greenskins have no corruption problems. Yes, they get corruption reductions on their shaman hunt, and it's good. This one should solve your problem. It's not a great corruption reduction, but it provides control. And what that means is fully maxed out, 10 control, 3 corruption, even if you're sitting in the middle of the chaos wastes and you have chaos corruption. First off, the 10 public order should be mostly handled by that building. And second of all, 3 corruption reduction isn't bad. If you own a full province, it should counteract any natural corruption spread, or at least control it. It's really good. It can be built in the minor settlements, which is quite interesting. There's almost no difference for the Greenskins, major versus minor, other than unique buildings in general and the lack of the high ones. And the last economy building is raiding stashes. This is extraordinarily powerful. You can build this in every minor settlement. If you really want the best economy in the game, you build a garrison in a minor settlement, you build a horde building, and you build raiding stashes. You should have no money problems. This huge boost, well, not huge boost to movement, or medium boost to movement, good boost to your economy. Every post-battle loot, raiding, and income from sacking and looting goes up 2% per of them. If you build it in all 3 in this, that's 6. That's almost equivalent to a level 1 skill point. Plus the Greenskins have other techs that boost it. You can make some insane money from raiding and even more from looting a high-level settlement. I think I looted one of the Cathay capital cities at level 5. It was like 80,000 gold easily. I had no money problems for the rest of the game. Greenskin buildings are reasonably cheap to build, and with their solid economy, which arguably will get nerfed at some point because it's too good, you won't have any problems as well. If you're still having public order problems between Big Boss's Shack and this Trapper's Protection, it'll give you all the public order and corruption reduction you could ever want. And the last thing to note for Grimgor, since we're here, is you get this big fort unique building, which on Grimgor is worth building. Everyone else, they dream of getting this building as the Greenskins. But a lot of your money as the Greenskins will become from raiding and fighting battles. But your economy, even without it, is one of the better in the game, in my opinion. Okay, here we are as one of the more unique Greenskin factions, Skarsnik. So Skarsnik, along with Belagar Ironhammer and Queek Headtaker, I think that's right, are the other 2 lords for the race for Karak 8 Peaks. Basically, the premises for this, Skarsnik's the one that kicked out Belagar Ironhammer's family from Karak 8 Peaks, and then someone stole it from him when he went on an adventure. He wants to take it back. Until you take it back, you suffer a control penalty in all your provinces. Unlike Belagar's upkeep, it's not a huge problem. You can honestly ignore this for a good portion of the game as Skarsnik. As long as you build a big boss's hut in every province, get that lovely public order, you should be fine. So Skarsnik is, I really like his start because you start with Mount Gunbad, a gold mine, which you want to upgrade. 600 gold on an already good income faction is just icing on the cake. Now, Skarsnik has one other penalty that does not directly come from Karak 8 Peaks. It comes from his faction. He can only recruit orc units from Karak 8 Peaks. So until he gets there, you're going to be fighting a lot with goblins. But more than goblins, you're going to be fighting with heroes. So hero action cost -50, receive 100% experience. Really is this faction's biggest bonus. Yes, his goblins are cheaper to upkeep and recruit. Goblins are not such an amazing unit with Skarsnik that they will define the game. It's really the heroes. Outside of that, you get Doom Divers in your wogs. You get really good catapults. That's the solid catapult unit. And then when you get Karak 8 Peaks, you get a unique building chain, which is very good and worth getting. Not only that, but you get the orcs then. Skarsnik starts down here with a base battle. He starts with a Lord Sly Demiser, who you're going to want to send off to do hero actions rather than putting in his army. The reason is this 100% experience, cheaper cost. Every turn, if your hero is not level 20 and have immortality, you should send them out and do a hero action. You want to upgrade specialists. All told, plus 40, plus 50 cost reduction on your hero actions. They'll be cheap. You'll succeed. It is very possible to have 2 level 20 heroes by turn 40 or earlier in the game. You're going to want to use plenty of heroes throughout the game. Make them immortal. They will supplement the fact you do not get black orcs. Or, sorry, you don't get orc units, which means you're cut off from black orcs. Instead, you have to rely on goblins. Thankfully, you start with a spider. Don't lose this unit. I cannot repeat that enough. You do not want to lose this spider. And at some point, when you get upgrades for it, you want to put upgrades on it. You instead are the Night Goblin Warlord for the Greenskins. Skarsnik's personal stats are not particularly great. He's decent at defensive combat and melee. He's not Grimgor. He's not even really Wurrzag. He's not going to single-handedly win you a battle in melee or casting spells. He's more about buffing the people in his army. And that is buffed up by the fact that the first point you get in him, you probably wanted to put into Beta Night Sneaking. This will boost your goblins and night goblins by 6 melee attack, which is great to start. In terms of tech, you're going to want to get all these goblin upgrades and night goblin upgrades. Remember, goblins are going to be what you have for most of the game. So getting all the way to Second Thoughts will allow you to upkeep a pretty decent goblin army without spending any money. Skarsnik army is dirt cheap, and it's pretty good. Outside of that, nastier squigs here. He's also the Squig Lord. You're probably going to want to build some of those as well. And he has Dripping Tips, which you'll want to snag at rank 4. It basically gives a poison ability to everything in your army, I believe. Actually, I don't know if it's everything in your army yet. He gets it at some point. I can't remember when. I think this is your whole army. Regardless, Death Juice, poison weakens the enemy. He also has this ability for ambushes, which is quite nice. It means it's worth specializing in ambush with him because it buffs your army. Outside of that, his personal tree at rank 12 gives a huge buff, Spite of the Bad Moon. Big buff to your allies in the area, combat, melee, armor piercing. Not as great as some of the other greenskin abilities, but it's good. Fermented Fungi basically reduces melee defense and sends an enemy unit on a rampage. It's good to use on enemy heroes. They'll charge in. You can surround them and hack them to bits. Smart Hiding, physical resistance. This makes Skarsnik a lot harder to kill and allows him to stalk, kind of sneak around. He's pretty good at that. Underbosses. This is really cool because this gives you access to more of the lords and the ability to recruit them. Oh, sorry, heroes and the ability to recruit them, which again, going into his whole thing about building up heroes till they're immortal and then putting them in your armies when they're really strong, follows Skarsnik thing. He's not a particularly fast expanding Greenskin Lord, unlike Grimgor or Wurrzag, but in the long run, he can get way more immortal heroes than they can. He also steals experience from the other lords, so don't worry about leveling up Skarsnik. He's going to level up pretty quickly once you get a second lord. Cough him up, steals magic items. I don't really love this one, but you need to get it at some point because more magic items, you can always sell them if you need money. Backstairs tactic, again boosting the ambushes along with Ambusher. Armor piercing is a very nice buff for goblins which aren't armor piercing. Really helps fighting dwarves. This guy he hates the dwarves. He wants to kill the dwarves. This makes it easier. Since he cannot do orc units, it is actually worth going down his red line to get the buffs to goblins. Not immediately, but pretty early on. Definitely before you buff Skarsnik himself as a fighter. However, there is some other differences to how Skarsnik is deployed. He's got a different blue line. He has Ready and Waiting, which reduces battle reinforcement time for his whole army. So this means in a battle with multiple armies, your reinforcements will hit the battlefield before the enemy's reinforcements. Or if you're fighting a siege battle, your reinforcements will arrive faster to fight the combined enemy armies. He also gets Proper Tough, which combined with Route Marcher, he can move further. But the big prize here is out clevering. He can get plus 30 ambush success, plus 15, 45 ambush, and he gets bonuses when he ambushes. Yes, please. It is very strong. Mob Boss, if for some reason you're having money trouble with an all-goblin army, first off, you got some issues. But second off, Mob Boss, Renowned and Feared, makes his cheap army even cheaper. Plus the recruit rank makes goblins a little bit better on the battlefield. It is worth going down the blue line. I would first off snag some of his unique stuff up here because this will get you to like level 4, all of them. Then I would go down Inspiring Presence, get Dagobos to boost all your goblin units, and then it's really up to you. You can't take this to level 12. You'll be around level 8. Can be worth going down the blue line. Troglodytes here so that you have a chance of evasion while using the underway. If you're going to rush Karak 8 Peaks, which is a legit tactic, this will help. Be aware that Skarsnik does not get any tree to boost his lightning strike. He can just do that from the beginning. This means rushing Karak 8 Peaks is entirely viable. Karak 8 Peaks has usually a garrison army in it that's strong, but sometimes the garrison army will move outside and they'll put a weak army in there to build up. In which case, if you're present, you can attack, wipe out the strong army, and then, or if the strong army is outside of the settlement and you've got a siege attacker, like your starting spider, you can just attack Karak 8 Peaks and using the lightning strike ability, ignore the reinforcing army and take that settlement in one turn. It is a legit strategy. I've done it. I recommend not doing it in my personal opinion because Skarsnik functions better if you take a little bit longer to get going, get some lords, get a better economy before you rush it. Get Slidemizer to 20. Once you get him up a decent amount, once you grab his specialist, and if you're wanting to use damage walls or assassinate, this can be very useful if you don't have a siege attacker, which Skarsnik does, reduces the walls. Honestly, though, I would probably do specialist and then just start maxing out the combat stats so that this guy can be really useful. Once he hits 20, you add him to Skarsnik army. I wouldn't put him in the army till he hits 20. You don't want to risk losing him and all his XP early on. Once you've combined the two, Skarsnik and a level 20 hero are really good. So his start is a little frustrating outside of Mount Gunbad and the money because both you and Thorngrim Grudgebearer are fighting over this same enemy. Your first move should be to build up your army. You have a choice between High Place and World's Edge Archway. Depending on where the enemy army is, sometimes they'll cross. I would try and take High Place first, even though you might not have the biggest of armies. And by the way, you want to recruit Nasty Skulkers turn 1 after winning the battle. Because if you don't take High Place, they will sometimes combine armies and make this have a strong army plus a decent garrison. It is a level 2 settlement. If you don't do it quickly, Thormgrim Grudgebearer will mark it and take high place. The problem with Thormgrim Grudgebearer early on is if you lose a battle to him, he will rush Mount Gunbat in my experience. Now, you do have nasty skulkers, and Skarsnik does buff them. They are armor piercing, meaning Skarsnik's probably the best early on Greenskin Lord to fight the dwarves because he penetrates the dwarves' annoying amount of armor. You're probably going to want to try and ambush Thormgrim if you can, so you get both Skarsnik, any reinforcing ambushers, or a garrison. Once you take him out, if you don't have a Wog yet, declare Wurrzag on his capital and take it. Once you beat him in one battle or Wog, you can usually rush in there and get his capital. Once you get that, he's dead. You've secured 2 provinces. Fortify World's Edge Archway, fortify Karaz Akarak, and then you can start marching south to Karak 8 Peaks. A lot of settlements down here will be held by Skaven. Either take them or skip them. Once you get Karak 8 Peaks, the world will change and you can conquer lots of stuff. Enjoy Skarsnik. He's a lot easier in 3 than he was in 2, where he started over near where Belagar Ironhammer was, and they usually killed one another. You've got this solid ally to the north, Greenskin Red Eye, another Greenskin faction. Non-aggression pact them. Eventually, they'll get killed by the Slayer King up here. I've never seen Zufbar do a very good job of them, but if they do, you might want to worry about them. Gunbad, if you put a garrison in it and it levels up pretty quickly, you shouldn't need to worry about it getting taken by a random army marching by, but if you do lose it, that gold mine loss will hurt. And that's about it for Skarsnik overall. He's pretty powerful. Warlord of 8 Peaks makes his Night Goblins even better. He has the unique Skarsnik Wog, which is different than all the other Greenskins Wogs. It boosts a little bit more on the missile damage than melee. Skarsnik doesn't really have any buffs to missiles, so it's less useful on that point. But his Night Goblins, Fanatics, boost up by Nasty Skulkers are great. I will point out, Night Goblins with upgrades on them, Skarsnik's Death Juice, takes damage over time type stuff to the enemy, can be really cool. But the big prize is, of course, Spinning Loons. Use that on the Dwarf Army and watch some of their units just melt. It's great. Okay, here we are in Bretonnia with Grom de Paunch. So Grom de Paunch is all about goblins as well, making him very similar to Skarsnik. Overall, I'd say his goblins become much better than Skarsnik, but he lacks the hero boost. So he starts in a very odd position. He starts in Masaf or Call in the middle of Bretonnia, which honestly is not where I would have put him if I had a chance to change his starting location between Total Warhammer 2 and 3. I'd have sent him to like Lustri or something. But here he is. So his starting location, Masaf or Call, is a single province. So definitely throw Camp Ruckus on it. Solves public order, grows it faster. Once you get it going, you want to definitely put a garrison building in it. You don't want to lose this. Thankfully, this opening here looks wide open. It's not particularly easy for enemies to just march in and take it. This is a lot thicker terrain to march through than it appears. And you start at war with Paravan. And you'll have an army here. Paravan will have an army. You want to take Paravan. Now, and this is an interesting departure from the Wood Elves campaign. Otherwise, Talsin here has an army and will fight a Bretonnian and then take Quelnels. In Grom de Paunch, that army doesn't exist. I don't know why it's that case. It must just be a different starting world state. It's not there, meaning you don't have to rush Paravan down like you have to do for the Wood Elves here. You instead can technically go back to your land and recruit. I don't recommend it. I recommend you still push on and fight and take Quelnels. Be aware that if you don't micro the battle, you'll lose some of your good units. A good option is to siege it. And this is one few time I will recommend this strategy. Recruit another lord in Masaf or Call, because it is a march turn back, then recruit, then march out. That's 3 or 4 turns you don't really have as Grom. raise another lord here, and start recruiting them. Ideally, you want something that boosts goblins, because this guy's kind of about goblins. Raise them, march them over, siege down Quenelles. If you can, take it into siege without losing lots of units. Good, do it. Otherwise, you don't want to take too many casualties taking this. You definitely want to lose your unique units here that you start with: stone trolls, river trolls, and catapult. They're really good. You start off with a giant river troll hag you want to keep alive as well. If you can, you want to get Paravan. In this run and my other tests I did, Orion, Taliesin here, beat me to it every time. It takes too long to take Quenelle, even with recruiting troops. You'd almost have to skip Quenelles and instead rush Paravan, which is tricky because Paravan will start training an army once you take the settlement. Taking the settlement with the army in it is really tough for Grom. On the other hand, and I think this is a bug, I was unable, and I still am in this campaign, to ambush with Grom. Every time you try and do an ambush failed. No matter who the army is, Beastmen, Bretonnia, Wood Elves, even another Greenskin as I played further, I never got an ambush off. Hopefully it's patched. Once it does, it'll be a lot more viable. You can set an ambush, lure out Paravan's army, ambush it, then take the settlement. Right now, taking Paravan is almost impossible without a second army, and you have to do it rather fast. Otherwise, it will fall to the Wood Elves. On the other hand, the Wood Elves are not a bad person to own it unless they go to war with you, which can be very annoying. If they do, trying to wipe them out, it's honestly a bit of a nightmare. You would take magical forest damage. All their settlements are high levels. The exception is if you could sneak in an underway stance. So if you remember, you have the underway stance. You can jump straight to their settlement and then the next turn attack it. The problem is most of their settlements have an army sitting in them. These two are the most likely ones to declare war on you. You need a second army underwaying in to help you win, and you better hope you don't get intercepted or your invasion will be dead before it starts. It's quite possible to sneak in an ambush Kingsglade or Waterfall Palace and then loot Oak of Ages and everything. You don't have to. If you can somehow keep them reasonably happy with you, not worth the effort. If you can't and they're attacking you, take them out. Just raise the settlements. Holding them, you can, but they're uninhabitable, so you have a lot of penalties towards making money and doing anything with them. It's up to you. Outside of that, if you can kill Paravan, all the better. You should be able to push on to Baston, but what's more likely to happen is Aquitaine and the Fey Entrenchers will attack you. If so, you want to wipe them out. The Fey Entrenchers is strong. She starts off with the Grail Guardians and stuff, which are legitimate. All the Bretonnians early on, though, are pushovers if you kill their starting army, because they won't have the needed cav to fight you. Their peasant units, you will absolutely wreck. The danger is cav. So that's where an ambush stance would really help. Currently, as I said, wasn't working for me in my test runs. If you can get ambushes off, way easier. Threaten a fortress with one army, set up an ambush nearby to lure them out, take their capital. Capital Carcassonne is a much better capital location than Massaf or Call, so make this into your forward base. Massaf or Call should still be protected. It's a valuable fallback point. It's very hard to lose it without seeing it coming because it has one entrance point. Just be aware that Castle Carcassonne is way more likely to get attacked by beastmen to the south or other people. Now, outside of that, Grom de Paunch has a hatred of the High Elves. In fact, he wants to turn the High Elves Queen Ariel into food and boil her and then eat her in a very disgusting thing. But that goes along with his whole thing, which is he's a huge fat guy. As you can see, I'm always eating. He is on the hunt for food. And this is his unique thing, which is Grom's Cauldron. So we'll go into this. As you progress through the game, you will get cooking ingredients from quests and victories and stuff. Once you have a cooking ingredient, you combine two up here. You will make a dish that'll give you a bonus. It does cost scrap to do. you can develop a recipe book so you know what the outcomes are. Now, there are 25 ingredients and 15 recipes. And Grom isn't eating, he gets a bonus to hit points. Otherwise, he'll get buffs to either his units, his abilities, etc. They're all good to get. Now, how do you get the ingredients outside of battles and quests? This unit right here. This is the food merchant. So if we take Grom, let's see, I think we can reach that. Yes. We go in and we talk to the food merchant. So you can try and rob her, which has some problems. You get some money. You can let her cook. She'll make a random recipe. You can do a cooking challenge. She'll challenge you to complete a dish. She'll add money to your treasury and unlock a cauldron ingredient slot so you can cook more with more than just 2 ingredients. Be aware, though, you might not have the ability to cook her ingredient at the time, or you can spend money. In this case, we'll spend 1,000 and we'll buy the ingredient. Now, if we go into the cauldron, we can put in both ingredients and you'll see, well, once we start cooking, this is what it would give us. Charge bonus to Grom, regeneration for goblins. This is a very good one to get early on if you can get it. Healing on goblins, that's huge. So Grom himself, he also has a decreased recruitment time for goblin units, which is very nice. Unfortunately, goblin units you can tend to train almost everywhere except for the high level ones. So Grom has the standard blue line and honestly the standard red line. You're going to probably still want to do Dagobos to boost goblins even further because he's all about goblins. Even though he has access to orcs, his goblins can become better than orcs in the long run. His basic special abilities, he boosts leadership of goblins so they no longer run away. He boosts his aura, which is great because you can get it huge so his units don't have high leadership and don't run. He has this culinary curmudgeon, which gives a very needed replenishment and growth. Gargantuan glutton makes him slightly more resistant in battle. He's not terrible in combat, but he's not great. Chariot races boosts chariot units. Boisterous shakedown, more money from battles. Roll him over. Attacks calls rattle, which weakens enemies' abilities, which is nice. And he gets a charge bonus. His charge is already good. This means he gets really good. He's kind of already a chariot unit once he gets going, which is kind of cool. He also has down to size. This boosts. This is one you can get at rank 6, so it's worth getting. Gives his goblins +6 attack. He's coming back, weakens elves, and he heals. And this one makes goblins fight better against cav and large units. Then he also gets Goblin Tide. Gives his goblins armor and more attack. All told, just from these 2 abilities, which he gets pretty early on by 10, that's +12 to goblins attack, 15 to armor, and 10 to bonus to large. Also, Goblin Tide's funny. 10 goblins, inconvenient. 100, alarming. 1,000, might be one of my favorite descriptions. Boost to Gobos, another 6 attack, another defense. You're looking at 18 attack, defense, and other stuff on a unit that starts with a reasonably low amount, and you boost it even higher. His passive, the Great Un, gives physical resistance to his goblins, get leadership when fighting the elves. Wagons and chariots are cheaper, and he gets the wogs. So as you can imagine, you can end up with some pretty gazy goblin units, especially with all these buffs and techs you can get for goblins as well. It'll be cheap. It'll hit hard. It boosts even like night goblin units are good with that as well. Grom himself will never be a great fighter, but he's the leader of the goblins. He has regeneration, so his stats aren't as bad as they might appear. In terms of his quests, I don't love them. I really don't, but he gets him ward defense and makes his entire army have 1 more melee defense. Axe of Grond makes him that much better in melee combat if he needs to be in it. I wouldn't stick him in it anyway, but they're not terrible. And to win, Grom is kind of interesting. He has to take Toll Urves, who has also a campaign to wipe him out. In the meantime, he has to get 30 settlements. It's quite easy to conquer Bretonia early. There's really no threat once you beat the army. Just be aware, if you leave Luan Liangke up here long enough, he gets Cav, and he becomes a lot harder to kill. Once you've built up, you can build up quite a base and then start invading the high elves, or they will start invading you more likely. The goal is to take Tol Yurgres. If you can, you got to kill Altharion. He's a little bit hard to do. Once you do, though, you're on Ulthwain. At that point, you can probably afford to overrun it. Be aware that it is worth trying to subdue the forts leading into Bretonnia, or at worst, fortify places like Montfort with garrisons. So if you do get attacked from the sides, you'll be pretty good. This mountain range here, outside of the elves, is a great defensive barrier. You'll really only have to worry about enemies from the south, Skaven, Beastmen, from the west, High Elves, and from the north, Bretonnia-ish. As Grom is a pretty easy campaign once you figure out how to beat Bretonnia. So lots of goblins. He gets all the goblins. His goblins are better than Skarsnik, in my opinion. They get a lot more combat stats. He really doesn't even need to build orcs if you don't want to. Obviously, at which point he builds orcs, he becomes just like every other greenskin lord. On to the last one. Okay, here we go as the last greenskin lord, Azhag the Slaughterer. And I'm going to be honest and forthright with you guys. I don't really know why you would really want to play this guy compared to some of the others. I don't particularly like him. So he starts up here in Kazag Urukalaz, which is a decent settlement, and you should throw a garrison building in it almost immediately, especially because the Slayer King will probably come east to Grasnock's Lair, and then you're a short hop and a skip jump away. Now, Azhag himself starts here, put in the hero, fight this battle. You can take Karaz Ungar early on if you push or micro fight the battles. Otherwise, stay in your land, which is right here. Build up troops. Probably orc boys, maybe a goblin archer. I prefer orc boys. Take it. It's a gold mine. It's good. Push on. Take the Fort Jakova camp. Kill it off. And Karaz Rasarik. And you'll control the region. You'll kill off the ogres. And then you can kind of decide what you want. Also, cool flying thing. You can push east out of the mountains if you want to. You got to get through the area near Grasnock's Lair, or just underway through it right here. You can fight the vampires, subdue this area. It is a wasteland. You're fine. You push a little further, you'll run across Grimgor over here. You can fight him, confederate him, etc. if you want. It's not a bad strategy. What the AI does, and I don't really know if you're supposed to, is push into the Empire. Be aware there are wood elves here. They are semi-aggressive. Kislev is to your north. Sometimes you can get a non-aggression pact with them. Other times they'll attack you. It's really tempting to fight them. Be aware taking Kislev is an ordeal, but if you take it, it gives you a very strong base in the region. You could go south. You do have relations with vampire counts. So the Silver Pinnacle over here, you actually have decent relations with. The aversion with you is unavoidable, but it means they're neutral. You still can't, you can get a non-aggression pact with them at the beginning. If you don't want to go east, it's worth doing. By and large, I didn't find them to attack me. They tended to die first. The vampire counts, Vlad and Isabella down here, sometimes you can become non-aggression with, or even allies. If you do, leave them to fight the southern part of the empire. You can push north. Beware that if you push too far north, you'll run across the other Kislevite faction up there. And obviously Chaos if they're invading as well. You could also go south, kill off the Slayer King, keep pushing south towards the other Karaz, Eight Peaks region as well. You don't have a real mission to do so. Your whole victory condition is invade the Empire, really, and control this border area. It's not huge. You basically control this region in the game is your mission. It's not hard. Be aware that once you start expanding the Empire, you can get dogpiled by a lot of people from a lot of directions. So it might be worth consolidating the mountains here before you do so. If you go south, you'll run across Skarsnik. You can conquer him. He makes a half-decent ally. He doesn't tend to die that easily, so he'll hold the southern area for you, so then you can safely go west. Otherwise, you're risking the Slayer King and Zufbar coming after you. If you ally Vlad, if you do it fast enough, or Isabella, you can easily take the needed areas here before they start taking it. Or you can ally them and just sit back and let them conquer the Empire while you go east or otherwise. It's not a hard campaign. I think he needs a unique mechanic he doesn't have. He'd be one of my top lords for a rework. He just feels weird. His unique faction stuff is obviously relations with vampires. You get Wyverns, flying units in your armies, research faster, and you sack settlements more. Cool. Okay. I mean, I don't feel it's game breaking. Now, his tree is a little bit interesting. He's got the standard blue tree, but the standard red tree. He has access to the lore of death thanks to this crazy crown he's wearing. Um, or actually, I don't know if he starts with it now, but he has access to death magic, which makes him kind of a spellcaster. I like Wurzag's better, but that's me. Standard green, standard yellow line. His actual combat abilities, he gets really good upkeep on his orcs. He's just strong. They attack better, they move faster, they shoot better. Shamans are stronger. You get flanking abilities. Enemies you siege take more attrition. You intercept enemies, charge, hit harder, cast spells, and get regeneration. It's okay. He's not as great a fighter as Grimgor. He still can become pretty powerful. All his stuff is strong. Don't get me wrong. I just don't feel him, you know? He gets a Wyvern, so he gets a flying mount. I am on the fence with it. Yes, he can fly and cast spells. Okay. He can also land and fight, but if he lands and fight, he's a little bit weaker than if he stayed on the ground and fought. Get on with it is nice though, because you can fly above your army and boost their leadership. It's cool, stacks with inspiring presence nicely. Your units very rarely will run away. They fight decently well. The problem is, I just don't feel any specific unique thing about him besides death magic. That's my personal assessment of it all. He gets these flying monsters, the Wyverns, which is cool. Obviously, you can get some other unique ones I didn't talk about. His Wog is solid, causes terror, damage, less damage than Grimgor, more damage than Skarsnik. Terror and Fear is nice. He's strong, but he's nothing really overly special. And your Wog, save that for charging deep into the Empire is my advice. And that's Azhag the Slutter. That's all the Greenskins. This is over 2 hours plus of a guide until I cut stuff down. We'll see what it stays at. Sorry about the mistake midway through. I wanted to leave it in because it cost me 40 minutes of loading times. And hopefully this has helped you. If you have any questions or you have some really good strategies, leave them below. Please do like and subscribe if you watched all of it, which I'm surprised you had a couple free hours. But thank you all for watching, and I will see you guys all in another guide, a random video, or even a Let's Play, or a live stream. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.